So now we are starting the class. Okay. So in last class we did about the same thing, like define the source views and define different things, like prepared a queue and we modified measures, attributes and hierarchies, which means we added some hierarchies to the dimensions and we added some attributes to that dimension table and modified measures, like how to change the aggregation of that measure. And we did something about this also, and yes, the relationship between the dimension. So I'm just switching back to that. So I am in the cube adventureworks.cube object. So this window here, here we know about like this cube structure. We did something on this dimension usage, which means how the measures and dimensions are connected, how they are connected with each other using some common keys. And next to it we calculated some calculations, which means it is similar to some derived measure. And for that we used this form view. So when we click on this icon form view, then it should open the script. So when we calculate new this icon like new measure, then we get a form view, which means how to define a new calculated measure. So we did something for this, like we calculated some measure, and now we will start with this KPI as we did in that tabular modeling. We calculated there also. So in the same way we can have the KPI here also. So you people are there, or should I wait?
No, I'm there.
Kavi, are you there?
Yes, I'm there. Hello?
Yes, now I can hear you.
Okay.
Okay, so my voice is there. You people are listening me.
Yes.
Okay. So we know we did something on these three tabs. Now we'll continue on the rest tabs. So we will try to cover all the tabs today. So here will come have a new KPI like we did in our uh, SSAS tabular modeling, but the same thing we will be creating here, but there are some different UIs. So as you can see here, there are some different icons here. So there is this create a new KPI. So when we click on it, window will open, and there we will define a KPI, like what we need, like let its name be like KPI underscore new, and associated measure group. We want you suppose we have some more than internet sales. Now we are having a one measure. As you can watch that the queue have these five parts. So out of which one is the measure one. So here is this. So if you have more than one measure group, then you can have here like all. So but at present we are having one. So we click on it like fact internet sales, which means the KPI will work on this fact internet sales measures only. So now we will provide the value. As we know, for each KPI there will be value, goal and status. Okay, so suppose we are taking some sum of amounts, sales amount, so drag it here. Okay, so we want like this, like the value will be the sum of amount, and what we are defining some goals. So provide some I'm providing just a fixed constant value, which means if the sales amount is greater than 100, then I want some status here. So let's take that traffic light signal, And yes, we selected this traffic light signal, which means if our will create something like if our this condition sales amount is greater than this, then we want green. If it is below than something, or if it is else. So let's try to create the condition. So in this status indicator, we selected this, and I just want to change the shape from here. So let it be traffic light signal. Now provide the condition, which means we will provide the three conditions for traffic light, because the here will have three conditions like green for greater than 100, and red for less than 100, and if we get something else, then we will have a third condition. So let's have a greater than and less than. So here we can write some string, some expression, and that expression is in MDX. So MDX is not too much different than T-SQL. It's very similar to SQL statement. So you can see like it is very similar to SQL. So we can write some case statement here, like case when it's sales amount, which means we are comparing with it. So let's take it is greater than 100, then 1, and the next statement will be like when in the same measure to copy it will be is smaller than equal to 100, then minus 1, else 0, and so we are ending the case statement. So what we are trying to create here is like when the sum of sales amount will be greater than 100, then 1, which means this 1 will go to the green signal of the traffic light, and minus 1 will be as a red, and the else 1 will be the 0. That will be uh, whichever is not in this condition, that will be as 0. So obviously we will not have the third condition. So let's create it. So whenever you create anything, you need to have like process the queue. While we process the queue, which means we are deploying it to the server, which means the local analysis server. So we are having some errors. So let's process full before it. So the process has been successfully. So close it. Close. So we have created some KPI here. You can browse that KPI. Okay, so so we are in this KPI tab, and into this we are in this we clicked on this create new KPI, and these icons are like something else. So here we have using this icon processed, I click to process this whole queue, and we are having this KPI dimension KPI tab. So how we are just providing some different parameters of that KPI, and we clicked on this to create new KPI, and now we will uh, view that KPI. So click on it, then it will give you like how the KPI will look like. Also it is saying like we are not having any KPI, so reconnect it. So let's bring the error before. So I'm just closing it and reopening the project because I'm getting some error. I'm just removing the errors for now. Are there any errors? No, not happening here. Let's not deploy the queue first. So now I'm just deploying the project to our server. So now we are not having error because there were some error to that columns. So we will see into that after. So now it is saying we are having some MDX script. So let's see where we are having some MDX error. So we can check syntax is okay. Again we are having some MDX script error. So we did some mistake somewhere. Some details. So we are having some error into this calculation. So let's see. The form we cannot because the MX script or the syntax is incorrect. So this is the error. So let's remove it. Now deploy the cube. We found the error like we created some calculated column, but we haven't provided the other things. So there were we were getting some syntax error. So I just deleted that calculated column, and now it is showing like we have successfully processed the queue. So close it, and now come back to the queue, which means this queue. And here we were on this KPI. We created some KPI here based on our some condition, and the condition was like the sales amount is greater than 100, then we want some indicators. And click on this view, browse view. It will give you like the how the KPI will look. So as you can see, the KPI is something name and the value is far greater than 100, then obviously it is showing under the green signal. Okay, so now let's browse this KPI into an Excel. So go to this browse tab, and from there it will load the cube into our browser mode. So if you want to see, like we have created a KPI, so here you can list down like these are the KPI. So you can have KPI here, the value one. So we took the value was the sum of sales amount, and the goal was 100, and the status. So now in this browser tab you will have that 1, 0 and -1, the into the where we provided this case statement. As we were as while for this status indicators, we were creating some case statement like how to check the value. So when you were in this browser, so when you will plot this status, then here you will get the only 1 and -1. But if you want to have that indicator, so for that we need to go to that Excel. So before this, just click some first name I want. First name. Okay, so the most of the cases we are having this greater than, but there are some cases like the for Abhijit we are having 27 value as a sales of some amount. For that we are having the -1. So now go to the analyze in an Excel. There we will have the indicator. So this KPI status will be there as an indicator. So minimize it. So here you will have that KPI as a separate field. So just click on it and select the value, goal, status, and to that customer we were taking the first customer name, first name of the customer, then you put the rows. Now you are having the same thing, like we created some indicator, which means whenever the uh, value, which means whenever the sum of sales amount is less than 100, which means you will have the red signal, and for others you will have green. As you can see here, while you will be sliding down, you are having red for the these ones. And the same thing we were just browsing the cube, the existing cube. So is it clear like how we are creating KPI? Just click on
Yeah.
the KPI tab. From there you will have this icon, new KPI.
Sanjay,
There is nothing. Yes.
hello. Hi, Sanjay. In the condition you gave that if it is greater than 100, it should be green, right?
Yes, and how we define, like there should, for this traffic light, there should be three signals. Okay,
Yeah,
so
got
one
you.
it will automatically take as of green and -1 for red, and for else condition which is for other conditions we are providing 0, which means the 0 will be for this the middle orange light. But for now we are just comparing the greater than and smaller than. Is it clear now?
Okay, can you show me the output ones? Can you show me the output ones?
Yes, yes. Okay, that we were analyzing into that Excel. So again here I am just selecting, I have just selected the KPI, the three values, which means we've defined the value for that KPI and the goal and the status. The goal was the 100. Okay, and as you can see, here we defined the goal was 100, and for that goal we are just uh, comparing it with 100. So in the same case, when the order sum
Yeah,
of
if it is greater than 100, it should be
sales
green,
amount,
right?
yes. So
Then why
so
everything is
for all
given green
cases
and
we are
only few
having,
in?
because for a
Oh, okay,
visit we are
okay,
having this
okay.
amount. Yes,
That is
exactly, because
goal value
that
or
value, yes, this is the goal
that is
value. It's not actual value. We are, here we have fixed value, which means we have provided this goal value as a fixed value here, and the actual value is this. Okay, so we are just comparing this actual value with some conditions.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and
Okay.
how the status will change according to the same expression value. So
Mm-hmm.
as for verification, you can see like for 27 we are having red, and for 63 also we are having red. Is it clear now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, clear.
Okay. So these things were very easy in tabular mode, but in this multi-dimensional we are having same thing, but the UI is very different. We have a separate button for each work. Okay, so next we are moving to the actions tab. Okay, so what is the action tab? Okay, so suppose let's create a drill down action and just watch my steps like how I'm creating the things, then we will discuss what it is for. So from the here same pane you will just hover it and there will be some new action. Okay, new action, new drill through action, and some new reporting action. But for now we will, for on simple side we will be using this drill through action. Okay, so drill through is similar to like suppose we are browsing this. Okay, but I want to have more details. Like for this value for 27, let's say I want some more values, to some more information about this 27. Like I want address of this customer. So when I right click on it, so there will be some additional action, and we haven't provided any additional actions. So this additional action we will create now. So we are just creating that additional action using the section tab, and we are creating as the a simple drill through action, which means when we go to that same value and right click on it, which means we want some drill through more details. So we'll go there, and from the here we will have the actions. So for to have here we need to create a new action. So go to the section tab, and from there you will have the new drill through action. Name it something underscore test. Okay, and define the measure group, which means to which measure you want. So we are having only one measure group, so select it, and the condition you can provide, but for simplicity we will not provide any condition. So next, like when I want, what are the different details you want, like I want something like for that customer I want to have a email address, okay, and the last name. That's it. So I created a new drill through action, and from that, when I said go here into this Excel browser, and when I right click, so now we will have that drill through. Something will be there in that drill, more actions. So first we need to process this. So we just selected last name and email address of that customer. So process it. For every action you need to process it again and again. Then the process is nothing, it's a simple redeployment of the cube to the analysis server. So we have successfully processed it. So close it, close this window also, this also. Okay, so go to this browser and close this section. You don't want to save, and obviously reconnected before. It's not coming.
Okay.
Reconnected to the two. Yes.
So when you say redeployment, so does the data in the cube, uh, refreshes and then it is loaded in, I mean, deployed, or it?
Actually, we deploy everything, which means we just replace the queue, the data connection and the new calculation, new KPI. So we are just replacing the existing with the new one.
Okay. Okay.
So we are on the browser tab, and now from here we'll go to analyze in Excel. And we'll try to bring the same thing. We'll select the all KPI status, and from the customer we selected some first name. Okay, so this was the last table we created. Now when you right click on any value and in additional action, you will have that this drill through action because we created it now. And as you can watch in this action, we created this with the drill through action test. So we are finding the same name here. So right click on it and drill through action. So let's see what is it. So yes, we know like for those two things, which means for those orders, we are having this value in our queue, which means these are the more details about this value. We with the first name of the person was Abhijit and the value was this $27. And what are the more details? We provided some drill through action in which and in that action we selected only these two columns. uh, customer last name and customer email address. As you can see here, while we were creating the drill through action, there we selected only from the dimension from this table and selected this last name and email address. So here we are getting the same thing, last name and email address. So these are like more details about this. So we have just created an action like what are for Ajay. So click on it and additional action drill through, which means we are just going inside of that data, and you can provide like what you want to that inside data. So suppose if you want some more thing, like I will select new dimension from here, and I want something like territory, and from that territory dimension I want to have country and region. Select it, okay, and obviously for to to have these changes you need to process it again and deploy.
Um, so earlier in previous classes we learned about hierarchies, right?
Yes.
So if they're already defined, so no need of defining these things like drill, whatever you are doing now. So it is not needed, right?
No, hierarchy is different thing. Okay. Or this action is different. Action is like uh, some more information about any particular value. Suppose this 144, some we got some of sales like this value. So we want more information like what is there in additional action, like when we drill through, we define like we want that name of last name of that that sales amount. We selected this, which means we want more detail about this value 144. So this action we are just defining a new action to the drill through. So there is nothing to do with the hierarchy. Hierarchy is just grouping of columns.
Yeah, actually this concept is there in MicroStrategy. So there it is for the drill. If you drill on year, I mean, if you have some value for the year revenue is something.
So that we call as a drilling.
Yeah. So it's not the same thing.
Now drill in and drill through are two things.
Okay.
So that actually there is some they are similar, but drill through will open a new table, new sheet. Okay, so new window, and drill in is like we are just expanding the things.
Yeah. So I thought these are same. So that's why I was asking.
They are similar, but they are not exact the same.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
there are two terms: drill in and drill through.
Okay.
So we did changes in this cube, like we added some more information to that drill through. So go to this. It's better to close the existing, but we can try if it is refreshing. Click refresh. Right click, additional action, drill through test. Now we are having the more columns as we selected more information about that drill through. So drill through is similar to the next page. It will open the new page or new window. You can have the same thing in the browsing tab of this Visual Studio. So go to this browser and here select the same KPI. Cube collection. Okay. I need to reconnect to my cube. Goal was 100. Some status, and we selected that customer first name. So we can do the same thing in this browser tab also. So right click on anything. Okay. So there is something drill through we have. I'm not finding that drill through option here, but yes, we can have that window here also. I think there is some. Click KPI, execute query. There are some options here. So leave it, but we know like what is drill through. So we can have the same thing from this Excel. Okay, so drill through is clear. Like we can, in the same way, there are some more options, some more actions, like we can predefine. So you can have a basic idea about what we do in this action tab. And we created a simple drill through action, which means we defined a new action to our existing queue, and that action we name it as a drill through action, which means it will, when we want some more information about some value, then it will open a new window, and that new window will have the required things, which means for that required columns we are defining it here. So is it clear like what we do in this action tab? So we are just doing a basic things here, so not difficult ones.
Yes.
Okay, so next we have the partitions. So I think we people are familiar with the partition because we did the same thing in uh, tabular ones. Okay, so in the same way we can have the partition here to create a new partition is something like it's a page, which means suppose we are having a bread, and in that bread we are having different slices. So it's something similar to that, but it's not exact. But for the same term, suppose we are having this fact, this value. So we are keeping the whole data of this fact internet sales in a single page, which means in a single partition, but we can store the things in two pages. Okay, so for that you can have more partitions. So create a new partition. You can go to this partition tab and you can click here, like create new partition, or you can uh, obviously we are having a one partition here, because one partition means we are having the data from this internet sales in one page, which means there is only one partition. So you can define like in this partition you want a data from which, so we can limit the data, like for this fact internet sales we want a data for particular data for particular things. So click on this query binding. You can have table binding, it's a default window, but we want to add it to using query binding, which means we will get an option to define the where clause. Where clause, from the where clause itself we can group the rows, which means we can filter out the rows. And partitioning is very similar to this, which means we are just filtering the data, the source rows. So let's create it quickly. So suppose something we are having, just go and take some value from here. just want a value to define that where clause. String answer, let's close this. So let's take define something on this product key. So there will be some column with this from this fact internet sales dot product key. So copy it, and in this will be we want to have partition on product key, which means if the product key is greater than 100, it's not a value. We are just defining if a order comes, and order means if a row comes and that will have this product key greater than 100, then that row will be here only. So this we are just defining a partition, which means we are just creating a condition for this partition, which, and that condition is this. Those rows which are having this product key greater than 100 will be there in this partition. So now click on new partition. So we created a first partition. For this partition we are having a condition of those rows which are having greater than that 100 product key, that will be there, and for the rest we will create a new partition. Click next, and obviously we will have the major group fact internet sales. Select this, which means from that major group these are the available tables. Click next, and now here we will define the query, how to restrict the rows, and again we will copy the same column, and for this partition we are just providing a condition, those rows which are having less than equal to 100. You can check the syntax. So it is saying like syntax is correct. Click next and let it be default. And if you want to provide some name, you can provide, but let it be default, which is saying like 1. Finish. And ignore this part. Cancel it. So now we are having two partitions, and we created partition on based on that product key. So it is similar to the same thing which we did earlier, but earlier we did partitioning on the year value, but we are doing partitioning on the product key. So we are just creating a two-page. So what is the difference? So we can process the cube. Then when we process the cube, there we give there only we get an option like which cube you want, which partition you want to process. So we can partially refresh the data. I will let you know from where we get that option. That is slow. So run. So now we are processing only one partition. As you can see here, we are just processing the next partition we created, sales 1, not the all partition. So close. Close. In the same way, you can select this and you can process. As you can watch, now we are processing fact internet sales, not one. So this partitioning is like we can define how to refresh the data. We are just refreshing partial data, not the full. So here it's an optimization part, so do not worry about it. But you should know how to create a partition inside that cube. Okay, so next comes this aggregations. So in aggregation, you will not get any idea, but it's an optimization thing, which means we can optimize our cube to pre-calculate the aggregations. Obviously, in this cube, we are having aggregation on this measurable value, and how we know, like right click on it when you edit. So we are having this aggregation, which means we are having some on this discount pack. In the same way, we are having a different aggregation on each column. So we can optimize this cube using this aggregation, which means we can pre-prepare this aggregation. Okay, so let's click on it, but I don't want to people to learn this, or it will create some confusion to your mind. So we are having two partitions, so it will ask you like to which partition you want to optimize. So let's select both. Click OK. Next. Just watch, I ignore about these things. I'm just clicking next and next. And click on the count before going. Count will let you know like how many rows we are having. So here you can define some performance thing like you can pre-calculate this aggregation, but that aggregation will obviously take some memory. So here we can limit the memory like up to 100 MB you should optimize, but if you want like performance reaches this, so you can optimize up to this percentage. So you can start and test like how is the performance of our cube is. So it is giving some performance chart here, but do not try to understand it. Let it be next, next, next. So this aggregation is not too much, but it's obviously it's optimized pre-calculation of aggregations, which means the sum, min, max, it will pre-calculate it, and we are just taking it as like how to optimize the cube. And now next comes the perspective. So perspective is very similar to the views of the SQL table. As we create view inside our SQL table, in the same way we can have a perspective inside our AdventureWorks. So let's quickly create a new perspective. So obviously in the same window we will have the same thing. Here you will have new perspective. Click on it and you can rename it _1. And in this perspective, I don't want columns from this sales territory. I want something like product table only. I want customer. I'm just creating a view out of the existing queue, and in that queue, in that view, I am just disabling, which means I want these things only, not these details about, which means I have unselected this sales territory, which means we will not have columns from this sales territory into this perspective one. So let's so we have just selected this product and the measures. We have selected all measures with this one dimension, product dimension, and rest we are not having. And let's take this KPI also. So now click process. So why we are doing process again and again? Because we are doing a modification to the existing queue, which means we are adding some more features to the existing queue. So to apply that modification, you need to rebuild and republish it to the server. Then only we can browse the queue. Close it. Close this one down. And now come to this browser and reconnect it to the server. Okay, so now we are connected with this perspective, which means we are connected with this adventure works under adventure underscore work. So we have created some new perspective one. So you have this dots here. So when you click on these dots, then you have the option like to which perspective you want to connect. So we have created this. So select this and click OK. So now we are browsing the cube using this perspective, and there we limited things. So we have just the required ones. As we selected the measures, which means we selected all measures, and we selected only this dim product, and rest we are not having here. So is it clear like what is perspective? It's very similar to the view of the SQL table.
Yeah.
You can browse it also like product and other things also you can take. In the same way, when you connect to this Excel, then there only you will have an option like to which perspective you want to connect. So I think perspective is clear to you people, like when you click on these things, so you can have two perspectives. So when I go back to this adventure works, then we'll have the whole things here, all the columns we are having here. And you can decide that using to this perspective column, and we created some new, you can readjust it also, and you can, for to reflect these changes, you need to deploy it again. So perspective is clear. So we are just moving on to this translation tab. So from the name itself, it is something to have with the language. Okay, so suppose some people is browsing this queue from UAE side, Arab country is browsing this, some user is browsing this queue from the Arab. So we can not tell them to learn English to understand these things. So we can create a new translation to it. So let's see how I'm going to create it and watch my steps. So I'm selecting this, any of this, let's take it Kuwait because I watched a airlift movie. Click OK. And here we are just providing a name, which means how will you say this fact internet sales in Arabic Kuwait. So you can provide anything, like I'm just providing anything. Okay, so let it be. So when we will be browsing the cube using this Arabic language, so we will have this, the name of this fact internet sales will be represented like this. So let's see before, so for dimension, for let's create a new thing for this territory. Okay, so quickly deploy it, which means process it. Then we will see like are we having these things or not. Now go back to the cube and to the browser and reconnect it. Okay, so here we are having this perspective and all. So we selected the adventure works as a perspective, and now we are using the default language. When we change it to this Arabic, what we selected there, Kuwait. So select this, which means now we will browse the cube using this language. So we created some new name for the existing measures. When we double click on it, now we are having this, because we created this new name using this translation. We created something new, and let's take the name sales territory. We created test Arabic. So go here and to this. Yes, obviously we are having this. As you can hover it, it is saying like for dim sales territory we are having this name, new name, test Arabic. So is it clear like what is this translation? Translation is something to do with the uh, names or renaming of the existing columns or tables. Is it clear what we
No,
do in translations?
I didn't get any. How you changed, right? Where it got reflected?
Okay, so I will do it again. So this translation is something to do with language. Okay, suppose we are browsing the queue using some default language, which means suppose we are having this whole thing in Kuwait language or something. Let's take some new language. Not take this. Let's take this Dutch. Okay, so suppose some people will have this language, which means the browsing language of the queue will be this. Okay, by default we are having English, but suppose some user is having suppose let's take Chinese because they will have their own language. So in Chinese people will not understand what is measures and what are these. So we can remap the names. We can rename these things to their language. Okay, so how to do these things? So you will create a new translation, and translation is something to do with the metadata, not to the actual data. Metadata means the column names, table names only. We will just rename the column names to the existing language. So whenever the user is browsing using that China, they will get the described name. So for this, suppose a user is browsing this cube using this language, so we can define for fact internet sales when someone is browsing from this language. So you can provide some new name to this fact internet sales. We are just remapping or renaming the things to that new language.
Okay. So all the column names will be in Chinese when you use that translation, right?
But before that, you not all columns. You need to provide the names of each columns.
So
If you do
after
not
that,
provide it, then it will take the default one.
okay.
So suppose like for this fact internets, I am providing something here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I have just renamed these things. So whenever the user will browse from this language, they will not get this fact internet cells. He will browse this group using this. So suppose I am renaming this sales amount. So I'm just renaming the column, nothing else. Okay, so deploy it quickly.
Does the user have option to change if he wants in English, he can do that, and then if he wants in Chinese, can he do that? Is there an option?
Yes, obviously he can do, but that depends on the installation language of the SQL Server.
Okay.
Okay, so if he has installed the cube using Chinese language, then he will by default he will get the Chinese cube, Chinese translation.
Yeah, by default you'll get it, but if you want to change, you can change, right?
Yes, for that you need to change the collation property of the server, which means you need to change the collation of the server, and from that collation thing, we can change the default language of the browser.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you will not get an option like you can change, but we are as we are the developers, so we can have this browsing option.
Okay.
So there is something with the SQL Server environment. So whenever you install the SQL Server, there you get the collation property, or there is a property which we call as collation that deals with the browsing language of the SQL Server. So by default, we are having English as a default language. But if some user has configured that in Chinese, so if he tries to connect to this queue, okay, so and for that queue we have created Chinese. So by default, he will get the things in Chinese language, the Chinese name of the existing columns. And if we haven't created that Chinese translation, then by default he will get the English one.
Okay.
But in this, in our browser, we are having an option to switch the language.
Mhm.
So with the first we are using with default. Okay, so now we are using the default language, which means that for default we are having the exact name. But when we connect to this using Chinese simplified, we should have different name of this. As you can see, we named the fact internet sale with Chinese internet fact, and that sales amount, sum of amount with something new, Chinese sales amount. Okay, so this has nothing to do, but it depends on the browser language, which means what is the collision property of that SQL server. So we are just creating a new translation to the existing one. So if you are not providing any names to the new existing column, then it will take the default name. As you can see here, by default we are having the default name. But if you have provided a new name to that, then you will get that.
Okay.
So now it is clear like what we do in translation. So just try to make yourself familiar with the different tabs. So in this browser tab, we browse the queue. In this translation, we provide new column names, new names to the existing column with some new language, which means with some new translations. And in this perspective, we create some new view to the existing queue. And in this aggregation, we do something with the optimization of the queue, which means so pre-calculation of the aggregation. So we did not completed too much into this tab. And here in partitions, we just create a partition to this existing table. We provide some rules, which means in where clause we provide something. And how to do this, you can simply click on new and it will automatically guide you.
Mhm.
Select table, next. And here you can provide something when you select this query restriction, which means it will give you an option to have SQL statement. So you can finish, and for now I'm cancelling it. But if you suppose if you have already created it but you want to modify it, you just select this and click on the dots. You will have the same existing. You can change it to something new value. Okay, so editing is available. It's not like you cannot re-edit the things. And in action you can have, we have just created a new action, and we have created a simple thing on drill through action. And in that drill through action, what we did is we provided some new information. And in KPI we calculate KPI indicators based on our conditions. So we created some simple light signal, which means if the sales is greater than and is similar than. Here the language which we call it as a DAX, not as a SQL, but it is very similar to the SQL. So if you people are familiar with SQL, so you can easily learn the DAX. And again, into this calculation we provide new calculated columns, calculated measures. And in dimension usage we provide how this measure group and dimension are interconnected. It's very similar to the relationship. And into the cube structure we have the cube diagram and what are the different dimensions and the fact. In fact, what are the different measures available here.
Mhm.
So is it clear like what we do inside the multidimensional SSAs? Now
Yeah.
you people are familiar with this, which means now you can easily create a data source, and after that data source is nothing, it's a simple connection string to the database. And after that database, obviously into that database we will have more than one tables, which means 10, 20 tables can be there in that database, but obviously we want some of the tables, not all. So we create a view, which means in that view we select only 4, 5 tables depending upon the requirement. And after that we create a queue, which means this queue will access this database view. And we created something like this. And after that we defined which table is a fact, which means which table contains the measurable values and which table contains the dimension values. And we bifurcated it, and in that we created some dimensions, and to that dimension we added some attributes. Attributes is like this, so we just drag a column from here to the attributes. In the same way we can edit for territory and for other things. We cannot take the all columns from the dimension table. We are just selecting the required columns to the queue. So is it clear like how and what we do inside the queue up to this dimension folder?
Yes.
Okay, so we will not do something with this mining structure because it takes another data mining thing. It's a very big concept, not a big, but it's a different subject. So we'll not cover this. And in roles, we have the same thing, which means we create roles is something to do with providing permission to the queue. So right click on it and click on this new role. As the things were same to the existing tabular, but the UI is different. So here we are creating a new role, and you to rename it just right click on this role object and rename role underscore test. Enter. Sorry. Rename. You can have any name. Okay, so into this you can have some description and what you want to provide, like whosoever is the member of this role, what permission you want to provide. Like I want only to give the read permission only. So click on this, and next tab you will have membership, to which member you want to provide. So click on this add, and you can provide the names if depending on the user areas. Check names, so it is available. Click OK. So this Sanjay is now the member of this role, and you can further provide access on this, like if you want to have this or provide something more access like read only. Now this members will have the read access on this queue. So suppose you are having more than one queue into this project, then obviously you will have a new row here, and for that you can deny or permit the things. So we were having the data source here. So this is the data source, and now we have the queue. In the same way, you can provide further more permission to the dimension, which means the things are same, but here we are having more option. Like we can permit some dimension, we can deny some dimension, we can permit the read write permission on the source. So this is very similar, but here we are having more options. So now again you need to deploy the project. So we deployed it successfully. So now I'm coming to this SQL Server, and let's see what have we deployed the things in the same way, or we are having different thing on the SQL Server analysis services. I'm opening SQL Server. So now we are doing everything inside the Visual Studio. Now we are done with the development. So we can close this. We can close this Visual Studio, and we can, without this Visual Studio, we can connect to the this analysis queue. So select this, click connect. So in this database list, you will have that multi-dimensional view. So we created a project with the same name, multi-dimensional view. So I will close this Visual Studio. So we have developed the things, we have deployed it to the server. So we have closed the thing, and now we are having the same folders here. So in the data sources we created this, and to the data source we created with the same name. So this is the same folder which we were having into the Visual Studio. Sorry, we worked on this new one. In this queue we were having some lasers, and to that laser we created two partitions, this one and this one. Aggregation we did something, lightweight is nothing, and to the dimension we have these things, and to the roles we created this role test. When you double click on it, it will give you the new window, and there we have the options like you describe some garbage description and some name, and we provided this read definition. Into the membership I added myself and the data sources. So these are, now we are controlling the queue on using this management studio. So is it clear, like we developed the queue and now we deployed it to the server, and now we can browse the queue using this. So now I will connect this existing queue using this Excel. So let's see how to connect to these things. So I'm opening a blank Excel, and from this data tab you will have an option to connect. So from this data tab you will have this get external data, and from that, from other sources, click on it, and there you will have from analysis services. Click on it, provide the server name, click next. Now it will list down the databases, which means into this server we were having two databases. In this multi-dimension, this one and this one. So let's see, we are just connecting this server. So we are having two databases here. So into this we created some perspective. So we can browse this queue using this perspective 1 or perspective 2. This default one, and this was the new one which we created. So click next with this default one. Let it be default. Finish. And I want some pivot table. You can have other things also. Click OK. So we are getting the same option when we click on the Analyze in Excel from that browser tab. So we are having the same thing here. Now we are not using Visual Studio. We are using the existing deployed cube to the server. You can have the same things, roles, status, and on that we were having the customer first name. So is it clear, like we had how we created a queue and we configured it, we developed that queue with some different options, and in the end we deployed it to the server, and now we are using this Excel as a browser.
Yeah.
And again we created some actions to this, and we are having that drill through action, and in that we selected these things. Is it clear, like we did so many things today?
Yes.
So so we defined action, we defined perspective, we defined administrative roles, we worked with key KPI, we worked with calculations, we worked with the relationship of the measure group and dimension, we added attributes to the dimension, we worked with hierarchies, we deployed the queue, and we created some simple data source and data view. So this was the whole thing inside this dimensional. Is it clear to both of you?
Yeah.
Okay, so next task for me is obviously the SSRS one, but before this, I will provide you a book on this SSAS so that you can have more information on this SSAS. Okay, so for theory part, please refer the books. Okay, and we will obviously we are just doing the demos and the practical work. So then if you now you when you read the book, then you will have a very smooth reading. Okay, so can we close this class, or if you have any doubt, then we can discuss on that also.
I'm good.
Priya, do you have any doubts? Okay, so no issues. We will now meet on Monday.
Okay.
Okay, and on Monday we will start with the last part, which means the SSRS.
Okay.
Okay, so bye bye and see you on Monday, and then the timing will be the same.
Okay.
Okay, bye bye.
Bye.